Osiyo Ulihelisdi nigade Dagwado B. This is the Arcane Alienist.
Hey everybody, if you're wondering what's going on with the introductory segment to today's episode, well, November is Native American Heritage Month, and that was me introducing the podcast in the Cherokee language. I think I've mentioned it before in passing. I haven't talked a lot about it because I'm usually more just focused on gaming and stuff on the podcast, but I am Cherokee. Full disclosure, I'm not a fluent Cherokee speaker. I know a few words, and a lot of times when I'm going to use them in any sort of formal setting or planned way, I kind of look them up and make sure I'm pronouncing them correctly. But that was simply me saying, hello, everyone is welcome. My name is BJ. And then when I said this is the Arcane Alienist in English is because I'm not sure of the proper way to connotate that this is a podcast as opposed to a geographical, physical location where we've gathered in person. I'm sure there's a way to do that, but I wasn't able to find that in the kind of the short time I had to try to put something together. There are Cherokee language radio shows and podcasts and other things out there, so I'm sure that we have developed ways of talking about broadcast media in Cherokee. I just don't know what they are and really didn't have time to dig that deep into it. So apologies to my relatives who are more fluent speakers that I didn't do that. But anyway, what we've got today is the first part of a review of the role-playing game Coyote and Crow, which I've wanted to review for a long time, but really wanted to give it the proper respect, given the nature of it, because it is a game focused on Native American setting and created by almost exclusively by Native American creators. And so I've been taking the time the last year or so to really read through it and absorb it, and wanted to do that before I reviewed it. And I was lucky enough that Carl Rodriguez of the GMologist Presents wanted to do that as well. We collaborate pretty often, so this is the two of us, along with a friend of mine, Sarah Rhodes Kurswill, who is a fellow gamer and a sci-fi and fantasy nerd, but also is Kiowa, of the Kiowa Nation here in Oklahoma. So this is the first part of us talking about the setting and sort of the concept of the game. Part two will be where we dive into the mechanics. We should get that out later this month. And that'll be probably on the GMologist Presents podcast, so we've got a little bit of a crossover going on. And this will be on my podcast, but then we'll put both of them up on YouTube, on Carl's YouTube channel as well. So you can listen along, or you can watch it on YouTube. This is a rough cut, as I said, of the audio. I don't have the technology or the time to go in and edit out some of the longer pauses and little disruptions here or there. We were recording this late at night on a Thursday night after everybody had a day at work and an evening of other activities. We got on about 10:30 at night and talked for a little over an hour. So again, it's a little bit of a maybe there may be some places where the conversation lulls or drags a little bit, but I think you'll find it really interesting. So I will just turn it over to that recording. Thank you again for listening, and here we go. Go ahead. Welcome, everyone, or in this instance, maybe I should say Osiyo, which is the Cherokee word for hello. We've got a special crossover between the Arcane Alienist and the GMologist. I think we're going to do some. This is going to wind up with episodes on both our podcasts as well as Carl's YouTube channel. But for those of you who I imagine most of the people listening are regular listeners, but I'm EJ Boyd. I'm the host of the Arcane Alienist podcast. We're going to be talking about Coyote and Crow, a role-playing game that has been created largely by Indigenous American game designers, writers, artists. And so Carl is here with us, but we've also got a special guest, a friend of mine, Dr. Sarah Rhodes Kurswill. So why don't we let you kind of introduce yourself, Sarah, to start off with. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hatso, ako'y maido. Hi, I'm Sarah Rhodes Kurswill, and I am Kiowa. And I have been gaming now not quite 2 decades, but after my husband actually got me into it way back when.
What kind of games have you played primarily?
I started with D&D and a lot of tabletop games, actually, and then just have naturally expanded from there to quite a collection that we have here.
Yeah. Yeah, we played uh Sarah's been in my old school essentials game in the past. And we're gonna try to get you into some 5e, and then that kind of has gone on indefinite hiatus with real life kind of intruding into stuff. But and you play with your kids too, or is it mostly with your husband and adult
Some
friends?
of the kids, when we had regular meetings, when we played, it was largely with actually family and spouses, probably the longest, and a few friends.
All right.
Cool.
And have you've been a tabletop gaming, largely fantasy, science fiction, things like that? Is that something you've always been a fan of, even before getting into gaming?
Oh, absolutely. I've read a lot of fantasy and science fiction, something I really enjoy doing. So probably made it easier to get into gaming.
Yeah. All right. Anything else you want to tell us about yourself before we get the ball
No,
rolling?
no, I'm excited to talk about Coyote and Crow.
Cool. Well, we're glad you're here. So, Carl, what do you?
Yeah, I think I was very intrigued by this by Cody and Crow, this product. I do like science fiction and fantasy, and that kind of tickled my fancy about it. Plus, the difference that it was proposing, and which does happen. We'll get into that. So I'm very excited. And I had done like an unboxing, and I never published the unboxing because I said in the unboxing I need to get BJ on to talk about this, and we're finally doing it, which I'm very excited to do. So I'm very excited to have Dr. Rhodes Kurzweil. Is that how you pronounce that
Mhm.
as well? So that's great that we're all doctors, so we can go doctor. That's great. I love that too. So yeah, I'm glad that we're all here to talk about Cody and Crow, and I think we have BJ and I have a plan, and hopefully Sarah can join us with her schedule, but to talk about some other Indigenous peoples related games during this month of November.
Right. So yeah, I should have led off with that. It is Indigenous uh, Peoples Month, Native American Heritage, Native American History Month. I think it goes by several different uh, titles, but that's November in the United States is Native History Month. Um, I guess I think I've made passing mentions before uh, in on my podcast or when we talked before about I am my mother's family is Cherokee. Obviously, you can see if you're watching this on YouTube, I am not full blooded Cherokee. I also have white European ancestors who are mostly kind of probably nondescript Scotch Irish descended Appalachian hillbillies. Uh, but I was raised in the Cherokee Nation in Northeast Oklahoma, and I'm aware of that part of my family history, and it's always been a part of what's been kind of important to me. And away from gaming and stuff has kind of guided my career and a lot of major factors and decisions in my life. So it was really, I think, important. Coyote and Crow is really just kind of personally important to me because it being created by other indigenous creators with a perspective that sometimes I think doesn't make it into gaming just because gaming is largely not written by has it been written by role playing games by indigenous authors or creators. So that's one of the reasons I think it's kind of a big deal. It may for the general gaming community, it's kind of, oh, hey, cool, another game that looks interesting. But I think for a lot of us who this represents, our ancestors, our families, our communities, it means a lot to that it's out there, and particularly that it's been so well received. And so I haven't heard a lot of criticisms or complaints about it, which is kind of an oddity in the role playing game community. There's always somebody ready to step up and complain about stuff. Um, and my gaming history, started with D&D, in junior high, and slowly expanded it as I've gotten more free time as an adult after I got through school to explore other kinds of role playing games. So I'm really interested in it. Not only this as sort of the setting and where it comes from, but looking at the game system itself, which has got a kind of a unique dice, using 12-sided die and even an in-game narrative reason for why we're using 12-sided die we can talk about later. So
yeah.
All right. Anything else we want to mention before we kind of dive into the content?
Let's get into it.
All right. Well, the cool thing, I mean, something that seems very authentically native about this to me is it starts with a story. The first thing you get is a story within a story. You get a story of a character that lives in this world, and she's trying to. I think she's trying to reach out and touch a deer, and it starts to pull you into sort of the understanding of there's something going on that's supernatural, that there's kind of the magic of the world. And then she fails, and so her grandfather is trying to give her a pep talk and explain to her a way to kind of gather herself back up and try again. And then within that, he tells the story of Coyote and Crow. Of course, Coyote and Crow, depending on what tribe you're from and which group you're talking about, those portray different archetypes, different characters, have different kind of meanings across different tribes. Although consistently across, I think, many tribes, Coyote and Crow are both tricksters. They're both fill that archetype of the I can't remember from Campbell. It's that it's not the cultural hero, but it's something similar. There are a lot of times the characters that in early stories about why the world is the way it is, they show that archetype will show up, and either through their own cunning or their own folly, they cause something to come into being. And so here we get a story of the Great Spirit knows that a dark time is coming, and that they're going to leave, and the people are going to be left without assistance, and leave some parting gifts, and asks Crow to distribute it to all the various tribes of the land. And Coyote overhears this and offers to help. And so they split up these bundles of seeds that they're supposed to distribute across all the tribes. And Coyote, being what he is, his curiosity, he wants to open up the packets and looks through the seeds, and he thinks it's going to be more fun to rearrange them so that there's a little more chaos and a little more variety. And so he rearranges all the seeds and all the bundles and distributes them kind of randomly, as opposed to according to the plan that Crow had come up with. And then when they reconvene, only find to reveal that Crow has actually tricked Coyote and used his own nature against him to do what Crow really thought would be the best thing to happen, have the seeds are distributed. And that's kind of the story you get. You get this metaphor, so to speak, of these seeds or being these gifts. But then when we come back to the grandfather and the granddaughter, she says, "Oh, these are what we're talking about. These certain gifts we have in the world we live in: science, technology, magic, the various trappings of our culture." And the one special seed, the purple seeds, may mention, which as we get into the game becomes the basis of kind of the gist of the kind of characters you'll be playing with these special powers that come from this. In the story, they talk about Crow seeding it in the clouds and it rains down. And what you find out later is it's some sort of extraterrestrial bioform that has, figures into the history of the setting, but that as people come into contact with them, it gives them enhanced abilities. And over time, they've learned how to harness it in very specific ways. So it is I would say, if you're looking for something to compare this to, if this is completely out of your wheelhouse, the first thing I thought of is this compares very much to like Afrofuturism, where Afrofuturism gives you sort of science fiction and science fantasy from an indigenous African standpoint of African people. I mean, I think, if you've seen Black Panther movies, you've seen versions of Afrofuturism. They're a type of it. And this is sort of similar. It's an idea of an alternative history where North America was never colonized by outsiders. And, the indigenous people of North America have been allowed to develop on their own. But the thing that allowed that to happen also, I don't know, do you guys pick up anything else? Or you want me to keep talking about some of what sets things into motions here?
Go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, I love the story within a story. So when I first opened this and was reading that felt to me a little bit like coming home. I think especially when I spend in my working life and a good chunk of my life kind of we talk about it like walking in two worlds, right? And so I'm not used to coming home in terms of gaming. Like it's always centered somewhere else. And so to have it centered
Mm.
in my home, I really love. So when I opened this, I was really excited when I got to the end of the very first chapter. Because I don't feel like that happens very often. So.
No, and actually, I think I liked. So normally, honestly, full disclosure, I do not like fiction in my gaming rule books, but I feel like this drew me in. They draw you into the setting. It's not just you feel engaged with the setting, and I also love. And I when you guys are speaking, there's this duality throughout, right? This duality throughout the story, the story within a story. Even at the end, there's like two lessons that are learned. I think that's, to me, that's amazing. That's fascinating. And I think importantly, like I said, it draws me in as a reader, as a gamer. So I thought that was pretty cool.
We're looking at I mean, some of this is the glossary and the index, but you're looking at like a 471
Yeah.
page book. The first
But
120 of it are just the story of the setting. And I'm like you, Carl. Sometimes I don't want to read that. I'll skip past that and I go,
yeah, I
want
want to
see
get to the
what the game is.
but yeah.
Maybe this is better. Would be better left is give us your game system and then give us a setting to play the game system in. But I think I understand what's happening here is they're trying to say there's something different about this that we want you to appreciate as a gamer that you may not have encountered before. And that is we want to invite you into a space or a headspace or a worldview that reflects the way Indigenous Americans view the world in their traditional ways. And we're going to do that by telling you a story and then by giving you sort of explaining to you how this sort of parallel alternate history setting has come into being.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, and the way that happens briefly is that I think the long and short of it is there's another ice age right before the age of sail would have taken place. There's some sort of, it is implied to be a comet or a meteorite that
Right.
passes by the Earth and causes another ice age. And so the Americas are left isolated, but they also have to go through an ice age where they have to endure the hardships and the stress on civilization and death and disease and less food, fewer resources, animals going extinct, things like that. And now we're in an era where the ice age has started to pass. But with the discovery of this, again, I think it's implied to have been left by the meteorite or the comet or whatever it is that is now become part of the fabric of the environment, and it's infused in the plants and the animals and the people as they've learned to harness this, as well as they've learned advanced math and develop their own approaches to science, technology, engineering. You get a sci-fi setting,
Right.
But a lot of the concepts reflect native aesthetics, native concepts, native ideas. Like they point out, you've got, pretty cool, sci-fi tech, but they don't have wheels. When they got the technology, it goes from like a boat to a boat that hovers to there's certain things that you would think would be naturally part of a sci-fi setting, or with some people like technology, that it's not there and how they do things. So I thought that was really kind of a neat explanation for, well, how would we get to a world where the Americas were never colonized? And now we can propose ideas about, well, how would the people here have then developed their own advanced science and technology, and how would that affect their society? And how would the ways that they live in the worldview of Native Americans affect what they would use technology for, how they might develop it differently than it would have been, developed based on people from Europe or people from Asia or other places like that. So, and they're really trying to draw you into that through this narrative device and get you thinking along those lines before you ever get into trying to understand the rules or make a character. Because I know, like I said, the first thing I usually do when I get a new role playing game, wherever it is in the book, I flip to the character creation and try to learn it that way. Do you guys have anything else on the other thoughts on sort of the opening story of sort of how the setting came to be?
No, I do. I do like it. It's a story within a story, like a mythology. But then, as you learn, and they don't like tell you. I think it's great that it leaves it open exactly what happened, and it's kind of told in pieces, like what actually happened. It kind of I feel. I mean, at least that's what I got. Is that they have this myth and this tradition that what happened to cause like the second ice age, and then the ramifications of that, all the history from that past. But then you're never told really specifically what it happens. So I think that's left up to really the people running the game and the storyteller and the players.
Mhm.
I'll share my screen real quick because I have this pulled up on my.
Oh, I have to allow you to. Sure.
We show sort of the map.
Yeah. Yeah, that was curious too. I do want to say, I don't know if I'm jumping ahead. I don't know what your plan is here, BJ. Are we going chapter by chapter, you feel, or?
Not exactly. I thought, we can, but I was going to share briefly this.
Okay.
You can see here, this is sort of this is North America, but it's flipped upside down.
Yeah, is it what I didn't understand that. I mean, I'm sure there's a reason, but I did not understand why.
I don't know. I'm not sure what it was, but, and then you've got, kind of the remnants of, you've got the free lands, which is where the first book is set. And then you've got some other nations, the idea that the tribes and nations of these regions have eventually kind of come together. And the first thing I noticed was, just for me over here in the sort of the south, which is to be the southeast, Katua is the traditional name for the Cherokees have for themselves. And it's funny. The first thing I'm like, what? Why is that over there on the east coast? And I'm like, oh,
they never
got removed to Oklahoma.
They never got removed. Yeah.
So this is where I guess I would be now if this really happened. And Sarah, would you be? Where would the Kiowas be on here?
We'd be in the Freelands.
Yeah, kind of somewhere over in here.
Yeah.
Okay. And as you get, I think we won't have time to get into it, but you get into sort of the brief descriptions of these. Here's the sort of the southeast tribes. Here's a lot of the Iroquoian folks. The Freelands are sort of the people of the plains. The Ezcan Empire. You're getting down into Mexico and looking at the sort of the southwestern, the Dene Republic. Dene, that is the name, the Navajo people's name. That's their name for themselves. Dene. And then up here, the Pacific Northwest. And I think this area in here is still supposed to be sort of a frozen zone because the ice age still isn't completely over.
Finished. Yeah.
Their plan is to move into Central America, South America, and there's even kind of a reference to Hawaii in here somewhere.
Right. There is a reference to Hawaii and some other, and the Caribbean as well. The Caribbean. So I think some things that we take for granted that I did not realize, and that's something that struck me too, and just to really get you into the setting, there is a description about what we take for granted, from a Eurocentric point of view, just does not exist in the setting, right? So no combustion engines, gunpowder, traditional firearms, no cows, chickens, pigs, coffee. Right. So I thought that was pretty cool, I think, to draw you in, to let you know this is what would be different, right?
Yeah.
So
I love that you bring up the animals. I just wanted to add in a little bit of the indigenous and my people's language. All of those domesticated animals, they're named very differently than our traditional animals. So they are given like a designation that treats them like a pet. So for me, I was like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense, because we call them different things. Like there's a very clear delineation between these are the native animals, these are the non-native animals. So I really like that.
Yeah. I guess the other thing to note as we're just talking about how this draws you in to play is there's a message to players.
Mhm.
And the first section is a message to Native American players. And it says if you have indigenous heritage from the Americas, take things you know about your heritage, your culture, and use that to inform the way you create and play your characters. Um, but then they talk about sort of this alternative timeline and things that may or may not be different, and recognizing that every table is going to have a slightly different version of the setting based on how they want to play and what they're interested in. And a lot of collaborations with they call the game master a story guide, but encouraging a lot of collaboration between the players and the game master to sort of help flesh that out. And then there's a message to non-Native American players where they're basically just saying, take the information in this book like you would any other role-playing game and use that to create your character. Don't try to bring in things you don't know a lot about, like things you've seen in movies or watched on TV, or if that's not if that's not really, if you don't have indigenous ancestry, just kind of rely on what we've presented here as sort of ways to play. There's enough here to work with, and I think they're trying to avoid people. Well, probably a lot of things, but I think probably the chief one is we don't want folks sort of inadvertently creating a stereotype or an insensitive or an offensive type of caricature of what they think a native person is like, but to rather, if you don't have that personal experience, there's enough in the book to kind of help you shape a character, and again, work with the story guide and talk to the other players and things like that to do that. So I thought that was really interesting. I appreciated that. I thought that was pretty brave and bold to do that. I think a lot of times even in today in the role playing game space, you either get accused of being too woke and pandering, which I don't know how you would accuse native creators of pandering to native people, but someone's going to do it. or you get people get offended at being told that they can't they can or can't or they should or shouldn't do certain things in a game. And of course, people are going to play this game how they're going to play the game. They may take that advice, they may not.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was very interesting to just up front and call it out up front. Here's kind of what we'd encourage you to do.
Right. Or strongly encourage you not to do, which is appropriate and create stereotypes. I think those are the two main things, right? To really avoid doing that. And they give you plenty, if you're a non-native person, to play in the world and the backgrounds that they've created, right? The fictitious backgrounds they've created.
And to still be very welcoming and say, we still want you to play the game.
Right.
We don't, this isn't a game only for indigenous people to play. We want everybody to play the game. Everybody's welcome. Just be mindful of what we're doing here.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering though, I kind of butted in there, Carl. I was kind of wondering what you and Sarah also kind of thought about that. That approach to say, don't make a stereotype, but
yeah. I mean, Sarah, I feel like I've given my thought, but I want to hear.
Oh, I like, because it also goes on in the book and it challenges non-native players that while we use the terms indigenous, native, all those things in the whole book, that in the world, those are words that do not exist. So I think I like how it challenges people to really move the discussion in the center of things to what really truly be grounded in. We were never colonized.
Mm-hmm.
My husband and I, he's non-native. That was a point he and I talked about where it very much intentionally shifts the narrative, which I can't tell. I love that. I also found going through and reading this and coming up with a character and all of that, it challenged even me. Even though I'm used to walking in both worlds, how much of that is just my reality, and letting go of that for a second and being grounded in something different was fun to explore.
Yeah.
I do have a question. that's something that I missed or I do not understand, if I may. What they talk about a two-spirit identity. I did not understand what that meant.
That was an odd call out because two spirit is the in some tribes the conception of a person who is either non-binary in their gender. But it's become in modern parlance, at least in sort of native circles in at least in North America, just a sort of a catch-all term for gay, lesbian, transgender people. And so I don't think they were meaning to say don't play a gay or transgendered person. I think maybe they were just saying don't call them two spirit if you're not native, because that's sort of a native way of thinking of those concepts.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think there was they're saying only Indian players can play.
No, I don't think they're
gay and
saying that
transgender
because
people. Just don't call don't, because that is a real identity that people have now, and you would be appropriating. I think that's the idea. Not so much that you would be like gay or transgendered or non-binary, but the two spirit really means is kind of a native way of in certain native cultures of understanding that. So yeah, but if you're not really familiar with kind of contemporary native kind of discourse and stuff, a lot of people will go, "What does that even mean?" I'm gonna have to go Google that.
Yeah,
Which I think is in part the intent, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, to ask questions, I think
Yeah.
also
Yeah,
right,
because it
to
also
find out.
says to non-native players, if you have native players at your table, they encourage that kind of discussion, not during gameplay, but like we're doing here, having those discussions.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so they do go into like again the timeline, which I think is great. To me, I like that. I always look for timelines in novels, and at the beginning of novels when they have a timeline, I love it. At the
Maps and
beginning,
timelines.
yeah, maps and timelines. I know. So I think it's great to kind of tell you what's happened. To me, right? They explain some of the mythological terms they used in the story in the beginning and what they mean, like in the game world. I think that's what I mean by what I meant earlier by giving us hints of what really happened, right? So
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that as well.
And just for people listening or watching, I think we want to flip to the glossary, because you're talking about, is it the Awis is
Yes.
the basically referring to the dark age or the ice age. This dark time that
The
lasts
darkest night, the darkening.
yeah. And but the current era, as they mark their calendar, kind of year one is the first year of the Awis.
Right.
So
I definitely feel like in general, because now we're getting into like the first three chapters are like, this is the tone of the game, and then the next chapters from four on are okay. This is the kind of the description of the setting. So I think it's important really to set the tone, like they do in this. I'm fascinated by the organization of the game, but like BJ, I'm very much let's go to the character creation and play the game. But I think it's definitely important to, and it makes me want to go back to, because there's some other, when you were talking about how this is set the tone, or you guys have say this is sets the tone, gets you grounded into the verse and sort of centers the narrative. I want to go back to some of my other game books that I know have like a tone and introduction and setting section at the beginning, and then in about the middle, that's when they start the game mechanics. So I want to go back to some of those games and now try to understand, why the authors are using this kind of structure in setting up the game book, which I think is now I'm excited to look at books like this again, and especially this one. I mean, honestly, so after reading the section one, right, because that was BJ's assignment, at least to me. But then now I want to play the game. I mean, there's so many, and I don't know. I mean, and it just suggests. Okay, so I guess the chapter 4 on is about the setting. Maybe we'll go into that before we get into some details, and I can share how my excitement what I thought was kind of cool with all the descriptions of the setting. But maybe you guys can talk about that first, and then
Mhm.
unless we have unless we want to talk more about tone and in that regard.
Okay. I was just going to throw out there that one of the things I think is cool, they're sprinkling in-game terms, but that's also a way to get you sort of out of trying to thinking on the world level, which is to not say the magic seeds that fell from the comet, but that actually has a proper name, the Adenati. So just anytime you're referring to that source of kind of superhuman powers, if you get in the habit of saying the Adenati,
that's very much like a
novel.
I mean, more of a novel, right?
We pick up those terms in other role playing games all the time. Either whether it's technical jargon in a sci-fi game or whatever a particular settings word for. We'll have terms for magic or mystical things, spirits. So I think we do that in role playing, but here it's if you can start thinking in these terms, and try to not think of, okay, we're at this city that's roughly located in where this is not present day St. Louis in an alternative timeline. We're in the city of Cahokia. And that's just think of that the same way you would think of Waterdeep or Greyhawk.
Right. Right. I think it's more like, I'm sorry I interrupted, BJ, but it's more like a novel, right? That's kind of how a novel approaches storytelling, is that they don't define these terms that are thrown out there. These terms are just out there, and then the context of the continued reading helps you to learn what these terms mean and to define them. So I think that's also a cool approach to me.
Or I'll explain it once and then it'll quit explaining it, and you just got to start to think that. I remember one of the first novels I ever read by an Indigenous author was Fool's Crow, and the character is I believe he's Blackfeet, but his sort of the spirit that kind of helps him is the spirit of the Wolverine. When they say Wolverine once early in the book, so that if you're not from that culture, they're talking about Wolverine, and then through the rest of the book they say skunk bear, because the Blackfeet's word for Wolverine literally kind of translates as skunk bear. So you get that one chance to go, okay, when they say skunk bear, they mean Wolverine. And then from that point out, that spirit and that character, whenever it shows up, is skunk bear. And I think you're seeing a similar thing here. They'll give you a little piece, so you kind of get a little bit of context to ground yourself, orient yourself, and then you kind of got to accept the story on the terms of the story. You get into the narrative. I think that's really cool.
Yep. So I guess again, like I was saying, that chapter 1 to 3 is the tone, and then 4 tells about the kind of world and the timeline, and then chapter 5 it kind of talks about sort of details of the world. Cahokia, that BJ mentioned, being sort of the central city that they kind of want you to. They suggest that you start the campaign in, and that's the reference point. And I mean, it's very comprehensive. I will also say this is great for someone like myself whose eyes are getting old. The typeset and the
This big
print size.
It is a very large book, but it is got very large font and lots of good and very good use of spacing to just give you a wall of 10-point font.
So they got a great double page map of Cahokia and descriptions of it. I love it. And I was, I guess I was, it definitely to me is different. And it'd be great if you guys could teach me, why I would or why I would feel, coming from a European background, that this is different. But it is very different to me.
Well, one, I believe it's been a while since I read this section in detail, but I think Cahokia is based on a very large trade center that was in that geographical location in the past, kind of in the vicinity of St. Louis, where St. Louis is now. In fact, I think if you go to St. Louis and go to some of the museums, and even at the museum, the arch that they have at the St. Louis Arch, there's references to what was there before.
Cahokia Mound.
Yeah.
The mounds. And I think it's only in recent times that we've sort of, I say we, I mean, everyone has started to kind of understand just how big some of these, particularly in the middle part of the U.S., of North America, these huge trade centers built around these mounds that had, commerce going from South America all the
Coast to
way to
coast.
Canada,
Oh yeah.
coast to coast. But because they were built of earth and wood and hide and not stone and metal, they don't exist for archaeologists to find the way those similar sorts of ancient ruins and ancient things are in other places. To then go, oh, well, who built that? Well, let's dig into that and see if we can figure it out. It's just sort of, it's only once we sort of start seeing things from an aerial view and can start looking at, there were a lot more people here than we maybe once thought there were. And a lot more going on. Of course, certain tribal groups will have stories about that, and people will say, well, that's just an old legend. Well, maybe not, So I think the fact that it's sort of also built on a real, like, that's a place that really existed, and they just allowed to just continued and remain there over the course of this history. So what did you think really jumped out as different? Maybe we can comment a little more about that.
Like the emphasis on comedy and poetry. That right. They do emphasize too, right? So the alcohol is not recreational, right? It hasn't. It did that. That didn't never happened, right? So
yeah.
So that's different, right? Yet there's still clubs. There's still like people go out and party, but it's not like bars as we understand them or anything like that, right? So I think also this is the only game other than Warhammer Fantasy that I know that talks in detail about sports in the world. I thought that was really cool too. So because I think the focus maybe is more on culture than on detail, and I think that is what struck me the most.
Yeah. No, Sarah, do you any of those particular jump out as something that you have a good explanation for?
Oh, well, I think definitely the comedy. I think in real time, in the real world, we're kind of seeing that through like reservation dogs and other native-centered programming. So people are getting a taste of now in the popular culture what I've grown up with, and the sheer wit and very dry humor sometimes that I think natives have just in general. I think I know growing up, and people talk about it, that if natives like you, they're teasing you like all the time. They're making jokes, they're laughing with you, at you, everything. So comedy is very much there, but if it's just quiet and we're not teasing and laughing, then maybe not fully accepted in the group yet.
Yeah.
So I think that's maybe a little different. So if people are rousing you, then it's a good thing in native culture, and the humor is just always there.
Storytelling and performance art is a big part of native culture. We think, I think a lot of people think of a ceremonial, like dancing and music and drumming, but I think don't think about that would also be happening because people just kind of hung out together. They would sing, they would dance, they would play music. Storytelling, poetry, songs, I think would be it seems to be a very natural fit. But yeah, the humor probably is, a lot of people don't, I think, sometimes because the stereotype of natives is of being very quiet and stoic and introverted, which is not really the way we act around each other. Maybe when there's somebody we don't know around, because we don't want, and a lot of that's about not wanting to make them uncomfortable, but also wanting to make sure they're, we kind of know each other and are comfortable with one another. But I think when you're ever with a large group of native people, a family or a group, club or a community or anything going on, you'll hear lots of laughter and lots of teasing, and and I think it's a level of humor that makes me laugh. The only people I can think of who can make me laugh as hard as native humor is sometimes British humor. That there's a clever, witty, quick, like you got to be listening and pay attention to get the punchline or hear what they said, because it's sometimes buried into a subtle, whether it's a wordplay or a pun or just a quick observation. If you're familiar with Will Rogers, I mean, his humor a lot of times that sort of, he would be sarcastic, but he never really was mean or crude or punched down, other than to talk about politicians. But he had a very, Will Rogers sort of kind of folksy, witty humor that to me was very much a Cherokee kind of thing. So yeah, humor is part of it. Yeah, if you would sort of develop clubs and performance art and things like that, the way we think of comedy and would be a big part of it. I think sports are a huge deal for Native cultures. We've always used sports as recreation, as exercise, as community activities. I know among the southeastern tribes, the Cherokee, Chickasaws, Choctaws, Creeks, Muskogee, and those tribes, the game of stickball, which is very similar to lacrosse in a lot of ways. In fact, there's maybe some suggestions that lacrosse was sort of somewhat based on. I've heard, I don't know one way or the other, but it's a huge deal, both as a recreational sport, just to have fun, but it sometimes was used to settle disputes to avoid going into all-out war. So you can imagine if say France and Germany, instead of going to war, we're just going to play soccer, have a soccer match. that was stickball, the term, and the terms in a lot of the languages for stickball translates into the little brother of war. And to think that it was, people got seriously injured. It's a full contact sport with no modern safety equipment.
Right.
So people got seriously hurt sometimes when it would get rough. But it was a way of settling disputes between communities, between clans, between even tribal nations, to avoid going to war.
Yeah, they have Oyama in here too, which is like the I guess Central American court ball.
Yeah, they mentioned chunky, which is a Cherokee sport. Oh, I think the Chickasaws and Choctaws play it too, where you roll a hoop and then you try to throw a stick through the hoop. But yeah, I think sports are a big part of Native communities, and I know there is a movie coming out in the near future called Resball. I think LeBron James helped secure the funding for it. That looks at the way natives play basketball, just with the native style of basketball, which Resball is. If you've never seen it, it's sort of basketball at triple speed. I mean, it's got the speed and back and forth of like a hockey match without the punching and stuff, right? But it's kind of got the street ball element to it too. So it is fast and rough, and it's hard to describe without seeing it. But it's just basketball with a lot of, everybody has court vision.
Yeah.
So just high octane, high speed. But sports are a really big part of Native communities. And I think particularly our traditional games, but in the modern era, basketball and I think baseball, softball, or community softball leagues, and softball teams are also, at least in Oklahoma, I know, are a big deal. Do the Kiowas have any traditional sports?
I don't know about that. I grew up with like hand games, which is a little different, typically played like in the winter. These times is pretty popular this time of year to start seeing hand games pop up, and those are betting games. They're
We do like
really fun.
They go into that too in the book too.
We do like our gambling.
It's in there too.
Yeah. So again, I feel like it's man. I mean, so like again, I feel like it's a cultural, more of a cultural guide to Cahokia than like a room by room description that you typically get in a gaming product, right?
Yeah.
So I think one, it gives
The
a storyteller.
proprietor of this establishment keeps 500 gold pieces in the latch nest behind the
Right.
You don't get that. It's just more of a
Yeah, you know, the stat of the tavern keeper is a 24th level fighter name. No, but so I think one, it lets the story guide develop those details, and two, I think it helps to, if you were making characters, you would know. I mean, you'd be able to really play them. I think you wouldn't. It wouldn't be so, I guess, so like video gamey, right? I feel you'd really, I feel you'd really get to do stuff other than hack and slash and kicking down doors. I mean, there's so many things to do to set up more of a role-playing experience, I think, to me, than just roll the dice all the time.
You mentioned clubs without alcohol. I think
Mhm.
that's another interesting thing there, that alcohol, it's not like we didn't have fermented beverages, but they never became a big social. It was something you did socially. It was used more medicinally in specific prescribed ways, which I think is my understanding. Again, I only know my tribe and the few tribes I've had friends with, and some more general stuff, but I think that's a common thing in Native cultures. It's not a total lack of presence or awareness of psychoactive substances. It's just they're often used in very prescribed ways as ceremonial use or medicinal uses, and not simply for pleasure or recreation. Although they do make reference to, there are people who get addicted to drugs and things like in here.
Right. So I guess, yeah, Sarah, you're gonna say something.
Oh, I was just gonna say, well, when like talking about like psychedelics and things, it's I think a big difference, and I think about this professionally too, as we're talking about like psychedelics treating mental health issues. I know it's very rare for you to just go and do that by yourself. Like it wouldn't be uncommon for you in our current culture just go have a beer by yourself. But you would not be using substances that way. It's usually with other people for a specific reason because it's medicinal. And so I think I like that they bring that into the book or into the world.
Mm-hmm.
I was at a conference earlier this year where there was a ceremony done, and the person used real pure tobacco. And we were all like in this sort of cloud of tobacco smoke, and I forget that real unadulterated tobacco, it doesn't stink. It's not noxious or offensive to the nose I mean, if you get a thick cloud of it, you're going to cough, obviously, it's smoke. But it's not, I think, what a lot of us now would think of, because we think of cigarettes, cigars, pipe smoke. I mean, you shouldn't just sit there and inhale it constantly all day. But I was just reminded of if you use those sort of things in a conscribed, more traditional way, it's a very different kind of animal than smoking cigarette. Of course, it's, although it's the nicotine that gets you with recreational tobacco. They've done a lot of monkeying around with both the genome and the additives into the product to kind of help you get there, as opposed to just pure old fashioned tobacco from way back. So yeah, I could see having, because you think about the point of going to clubs to dance or listen to music or to hang out with your friends is to go hang out with your friends, to have an experience, to hear or see something you've not seen or heard before, or maybe to go to a familiar place that just makes you feel grounded and socialize. Why is, why would a mind altering substance be necessary for that? Right. I mean, from a European perspective, it's just kind of the way that you do it. You have one drink, it loosens you up. There's nothing wrong with that necessarily, but it's not essential the way I think some people tend to think it is.
Yeah.
Because the point is to be with the people that you're with.
And that's not to say that, and right, I guess it seems the way we're talking about it is very exciting. It does seem very egalitarian, but it's not without conflict. There are definitely, right, there's people have different beliefs. There's different politics. There's different movements within Cahokia itself, and with the different families and tribes within Cahokia. So it's not like, right. There will be conflict. There will be investigation. There will be, excitement. Right. I think it's there. Right. It's just
yeah, you got a lot of the stuff you would expect for sort of a kind of sci-fi, kind of cyberpunk setting in a lot of ways, where you've got intrigue and corporate espionage and faction conflicts and politics and stuff like that. It's just trying to create a world where that can happen. Some of the same reasons it happens anywhere, because humans are humans, but also how does that happen in a world where you're not really dealing with the same kind of economy, the same kind of governmental structures, the same kind of societal norms that we have now that would produce, those sorts of things. Right. It's really interesting. So if you're listening to us talk about this and think that, and what I hope you're also hearing is you are going to get the stuff you might expect out of a near future sci-fi game with advanced technology and conflict and things like that. So you can still be a spy or a law enforcement officer or a politician or a merchant or the things you think of.
Right. Yeah, I mean,
stands out to me. Oh, go ahead.
No, go, Sarah. Go ahead.
Oh, I just, this chapter 5 is like, I feel like it's half the book. It's huge.
It is.
But as part of that, what really stands out to me different than maybe other games that I've played is there's like 2 whole pages dedicated just to sex and sexuality, and then another like page and a half dedicated to gender. Right. And so I think that's, I'll just say, as a Native woman, I appreciate that too. The way it sets up just interactions in that important relationship kind of way between people in general. Just sometimes as a female gamer, that doesn't always happen, I would say. And I'm not trying to call anybody out or have any trouble, but I'm saying as a female player, as a Native female player, with some of the histories that Native women still experience due to colonization, I really appreciated the time that they took to write that out explicitly. But I don't know how you both experienced that. That was too much information in there or not.
I think I can just, for me, and maybe this is more gaming in general, but it's appropriate given the topic. For me, I mean, again, as I alluded earlier, obviously, I'm not a full-blooded Native, and there's a term white passing that a lot of, I think particularly Indigenous and Latino people use. I'm not white passing, I'm white. I'm Cherokee and I'm white. I'm both. But as a result of that, some of those things don't get directed me, being both male and white for all intents and purposes in a lot of ways. So I don't get that, and then I think maybe even had to kind of becoming aware of it was not just an instant thing, because you don't experience something yourself. You go, does that really happen? And then once it's on the radar and you're like, oh, okay, I see that. I have seen that happen. I have seen it happen. And I think for me, it's more of a challenge of going, well, now what do I do about it, as trying to be a good friend and a good, ally or just a decent person who I'm watching this happening going, that's not cool. Or that was kind of racist, or that was kind of sexist, or that was kind of homophobic. What's that all about? I don't know, Carl, what your experience has been with that. I know we've kind of talked about that off channel before, just hanging out. But
yeah, I mean, I have to see these things, especially for a woman, through the eyes of my wife, who is also a gamer and probably has had similar experiences to Sarah, in that regard, with dealing with sexist, I guess, issues at the game table. And she tells me, and sometimes I don't see it, even though it's like right in front of me, but that after she explains it, then I'm like, oh, okay. And I think that's the important part is, and I think speaking to what Sarah said, that they are bold enough, the authors, to talk about this that much means that they're really trying, I think, in a way, setting the cultural norm for this, explaining the cultural norm for the setting, but also I think guiding the players' futures at the table to, this is the way we're going to view this. This is the way the world handles this, and I think that's definitely very encouraging. I think I mean I've taken, I would never understand from a woman's point of view, but as a Latino, I've gotten stuff. So it just, and I think it's great that that they are bold enough to talk about that and not and put it in I think it's very helpful. I think it's very helpful in the game. It's helpful to understand the setting, right? How the cultures view sex and sexuality, right? How the cultures view gender roles, how the cultures.
And I thought they did it in a way that was meant to just explain the setting and not to try to titillate people or make it.
No,
it's not done to be
preachy or
sexy.
anything.
Like, ooh, if you want to have an erotic campaign, here's some things you need to know about that.
Yeah, they don't have sex moves in here like Monster Hearts or anything, but
Yeah.
No, but the language is very intentional, right? So I was just looking over. They say, like, they talk about the average number of children the gestational parent gives birth to, right? So they're just very intentional in their language, and I appreciate the intentionality that went into that, so that it is a game where hopefully anybody, regardless of your background, can come in and feel welcomed.
Right.
Now that you mentioned that, though, I wonder if implicit in that, I don't know how many people would pick up on that. They talk about the gestational parent, and in a lot of Native American cultures, it's not that being the biological parent or the particularly the mother that gives birth to is not a special status or a special relationship, but we tend to have a very different view of who raises children and who mentors children, and it's a much more of an extended. It's not just your biological or birth parents; it's your aunts and uncles. It's
they explain that
their cousins who are their generation are also help. It's a much more a larger family, and a much more view of people having particular roles to help raise not only their biological offspring, but the children of their brothers and sisters and other family members that they've grown up with, as sort of sibling relationships, and as well as grandparents and great aunts and uncles and all of that. So I don't know if that was the meaning in that one, but it does, I think, also speak into that sort of view of, there's a lot more people involved in caring for a child, raising a child that they may learn lessons from or spend time with. You're not, I used to get irritated when my son was little. People would say, oh, you're babysitting. I'm like, no, I'm not babysitting. This is my son. I'm his parent. I'm not babysitting. This is my job, right? In Native families, it's the same way. Your grandparents aren't babysitting you. It's part of their job is to help raise you. Your aunts and uncles aren't babysitting you. It's their job to help raise you. So it's I think most of us understand that when you're talking about like one biological parent or one, even a step parent taking care of the children, particularly when it's the man. Oh, you're babysitting. No, I'm not. But now extend that out to all the other adults in the family. But that it's interesting. I didn't catch that the first time, but when you read that, I was like, oh, yeah, that also kind of reinforces that idea that it's not just about the gestational parent or the birth parent.
Yeah.
I know you've got they talk about Kahika, and we could probably spend hours dissecting. They do briefly mention the Five Nations.
Yes.
And there you can piece together through some very clearly, and then also some inference, like what tribes went into forming these five nations. And you can even see sort of callbacks to even those like the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. The Confederacy immediately, if you're familiar with history, tips you off between that and the geographical location. We're talking about the Iroquois Confederacy. Mm-hmm. And what it may have grown into, and it talks about some history, and you get little references to kind of place names of places that were historically important in real world time. They move a syllable or change it, but you can sort of see the root of some of these place names being references to places that were historically important to some of these tribal groups. Mm-hmm. I mentioned the Kituagi Federation, Kitua being from the Cherokee language. I think what I noted in there though was they think they mentioned something about being a place where there are a lot of scholars and philosophers and stuff. I know, we have a long tradition of the five civilized tribes from the South, supposedly, of lots of lawyers amongst us, and history in the United States history, having frequent engaging not only in diplomacy with the British and then the U.S. government afterwards, but also, going into court and defending ourselves, and learning the law and those written language and things like that. So I thought that was interesting that they referenced that in their description there. The other one that really was amazing to me when you look at why we're using 12-sided die, it's just a cool system, but they make reference to the math that gets the underlying of science and engineering. It's kind of developed in the southern kind of Southwest, which I think is sort of an homage to the fact that it was the Mayans had advanced mathematics, and that could have been preserved into the tribes of the Southwest that would give us a modern, but it's a base 12 system. It's not a base 10 mathematical system. It's base 12. And so now we're using, it's not a direct there, but there's kind of that allusion to now we're going to use 12-sided die for the game. So I thought it was pretty cool too when they're explaining these other groups. And I think the plan is for them to issue supplemental source books for all those five nations, and then to get into Central and South America after that.
Yeah. What stood out to me is that all the places are, they're very unique.
Yeah.
They're not just rehashes of everything, right? So they really pull out the uniqueness and the distinctness of these five nations, and even in the free lands, the city states around Cahokia, the different groups that make up the tribes in the free lands as well. So, mm-hmm. And I would be, because of my Latino heritage, I'm very excited about like an SCON book at some point too, right? So to see what they will come up with, for the southern neighbors of this first setting that they've described.
Yeah, so I'm going through looking at what else they get before they get into the actual rules. There's talking about written language as well as plain sign language. Mm-hmm. And then the Adenati, which is the word for the sort of biological thing that gives special abilities. And I think it's cool that they note that they've learned to sort of harness it from animals, so that you take on. It's almost like there's a genetic, it's like a transfer of genetic. It's kind of like Spider-Man, he got bit by a radioactive spider, so now he has spider powers. Well, here, if you get you harness the Adenati from a deer, you're going to get deer-like abilities. You harness it from a wolf, you're going to get wolf-like abilities.
Yeah, I did not pick up on that. That's interesting. Okay.
In fact, I ordered this set of collector's pins. It was a limited run. Some of these, like there's a wolf.
Oh wow! Is that from these guys?
A beaver. Yeah, this is from the publisher. You can still get a few on their website if you want them,
Okay.
but you have to order the whole set, so it might be a little cost prohibitive for some people. This is raccoon.
Yeah.
And so they're supposed to represent in the book where they go through the different power sets you can get. It represents a lot of these
Interesting.
represent those, but there's also a really, of course, there's a bison, also known as a tourist attacker. That was a shirt I had on the other day. It had a shirt on that had a bison, and it said Yellowstone Airlines, rough takeoffs, worst landings, or something like
Oh
that.
no.
But with a bison knocking somebody up into the air.
Cool.
But they have
Well,
another cool one in here that's actually the Coyote and Crow logo. But I'll spend
yeah,
forever
they're in there.
to find it. And then
Well, Sarah, what did you think of this last sections and
About the lands.
yeah, the lands, and then I guess the languages communication, because
Oh, the languages and communication.
or either
So
whatever. BJ skipped on ahead, so you got to catch up.
wherever.
I did.
I love that the languages, so they have like a whole little section that breaks out and explains how the language spoken Chahi, I don't know if that's how you say it. Um, I like a lot of it because it specifically addresses the fact that the language in the game differentiates between animate and inanimate rather than masculine or feminine words. And I love that my language does that. It even takes it a step further. You've got like living and moving and living and stationary, like plants and trees, versus inanimate, non-living, like a rock. So all of those are kind of conjugated differently. So I like that. So it's not split to this gender binary, masculine, feminine. It's are you living, not living. And then I like that this is me being a Plains tribe myself. They specifically talk about Plains Sign Language, which is still used to this day. And a lot of Kiowa, just when you're at functions or if you're around people who speak it, they still use and accentuate their words with hand signals. So it wouldn't be uncommon to use sign language and a spoken language at the same time to explain what you mean maybe a bit more, or just if you don't want to interrupt other people who are talking but need to communicate something, so sign language would be used.
Does it include lip pointing?
Always lip pointing.
That's
so
that's a somewhat of an inside joke and not a joke that particularly I think the Western tribes will when they're trying to nod directions. It's not just a head nod; they actually use your lips.
It's like your chin and your lips.
Yep.
Over that way.
So we kind of
used
tease each other about that sometimes.
I worked with some people, and when we worked with kids, so when we had parties and things, Indian education, we would play Indian I Spy. So you would, instead of spelling something out, you'd be like, I see something over there. Just a point. And wait until people guessed it.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, it looks like we're fading because we're getting distracted and playing with, but
yeah, I'm trying to find that one really cool looking pen and I can't find it.
Oh well. But I guess Sarah, have you already looked at the rules and made a character?
I did. So I had a goal when this first came out of running a campaign, and I never quite got that far.
Oh, okay.
But I made my husband sit down with me and run through making some characters.
Okay.
That's
Well,
as far
I guess
as
we found our story guide.
Yeah, that would be great.
No, but I think we probably should wrap this up.
Yeah.
And have some final points, and then since Sarah, if we are able to do part two, when we're able to do part two, then Sarah can guide BJ and I as I'll read the rules of that, but Sarah can guide BJ and I through character creation. I think that'd be pretty neat. I looked at some things. There were some prompts within both the Cahokia area if we play there, and other of the lands that seemed very interesting. If I don't know if they're careers, but they look very interesting. So I got some ideas. But yeah, I think it's been really it was great to talk about this for me. And I'm looking forward to talking about it more and digesting it from some of the things that you guys have told me, and to get ready to play in this world.
Great. Well, so we'll be come back into a part 2 and look at the game mechanics and stuff like that. So but I enjoyed spending some time with you guys tonight. Two great people, 2 wonderful people. I'm glad you guys also got a chance to meet each other.
Yeah.
At least virtually. So
Cool.
All right. Well,
Sarah
if that's
gets,
it, yeah.
Sarah gets the last word, I guess.
Oh, well, I'm just happy to be along and talking about it. I'm really excited and grateful to be here.
Great. All right. Well, we will be back with
right.
another installment later then.
All right. Thank you so much.
And I think that'll do it for this episode. Thank you very much for listening. I want to thank Carl and Sarah for joining me in this conversation. Make sure and look for part 2 of our conversation over on Carl's podcast, the GMologist Presents, and for the video version of both this one and the next one on Carl's YouTube channel. So I will add a link for the first episode of that in the show notes, as well as links to Coyote and Crow and some other stuff. So again, thank you for listening. Take care of yourselves up there. Whatever you try to do, make somebody happy. And I guess to say thank you again, I started with the Cherokee language. I'll end it. So the Cherokee word for thank you is Wado. So everyone out there, Wado.
Thanks for listening to the Arcane Alienist podcast. The music you're hearing is Come and Get It by Scott Holmes Music. The cover art is by Dave Bone. Be sure to check out his stuff at ironseer.com. You can leave me a message. I have my SpeakPipe account linked to the show description. You can also send me an email at arcane.alienist@gmail.com. Just embed a voice memo, or I'll just read the text to your email during a future episode. Once again, thanks so much for listening.